Welcome back to Switch to Linux. Well, today we want to do another distro wars, and we want to have a look at two Arch installers, those being ArchLabs and Endeavour. Why did I come to these two to look at? Well, because for a long time my Arch computer was running ArchLabs for about 2 years, and this last weekend I changed it over to EndeavourOS. Why did I do that? I looked at actually all the Arch installers. I went with Endeavour because I had a lot of other things to do, and Endeavour was the quickest one that I can just throw in a distro, push the button, select the desktop environment, and walk away from it, and come back in an hour, and then dump my home folder. And literally, if I didn't tell you that my operating system changed, you probably wouldn't know. Except with Endeavour, I get a couple of extra tools for kernel management and things. Those are things that are a little bit different. But we're going to walk through these. We are actually going to look at the installers in addition to the builds. So I have a separate virtual machine that I'll just kind of throw each of the installers in just to make sure I don't mess things up. And there were a couple snags. ArchLabs did not want to install right when selecting the GNOME desktop environment. I originally wanted to do Budgie on both of them, but it turns out ArchLabs does not have Budgie on the installer. You can still install it because it basically is Arch with just some extra theming components. That's really your difference. There's ArchLabs has some theming components, and it has a few extra scripts that are different. Other than that, it's Arch. EndeavourOS is also Arch, but it has a few extra tools like a GUI kernel manager and a few other settings and options in there as well. So overall, I was able to take EndeavourOS and convert it into the same Arch system. I've been using it for 2 years. I did this for a couple different reasons. Number one, for some reason, my ArchLabs computer would take up to 5 minutes to boot. I'm not sure why. And rather than flip through figuring out why, the second issue is it was not encrypted, and I wanted to go ahead and encrypt this drive since I do use it for more and more work. It's no longer just a generic media PC that I use to watch YouTube videos or something. It's actually something that is actually storing emails. It actually has some production work on it. So I thought encrypting would be better. And then the third is I was running the old one off of a USB drive, which has some distinct advantages, but there's also some great advantages with having Arch installed on the hard drive on the computer. Since I attempted to fix the Windows 8 disk that was in there, just to see if I could get booting into it or not, it didn't want to work. So I said, screw it. I wasted literally an entire day trying to get Windows fixed. That's how bad Windows is. Said, screw it. In less than half the time, I installed a whole new Arch, dumped my entire old computer, and my computer is exactly the same as it was with a couple of extra tools and a few small modifications. And so with that, I wanted to talk about the differences between installing on ArchLabs versus installing on EndeavourOS. And so that's where we are going today. So first, let's have a brief look at their websites. ArchLabs, it's just very quick, very simple. Now, this one is a little bit older. The last build is from November, and that could raise some flags with Arch users going, you haven't updated your packages when? And maybe this is why I'm having a problem installing some versions of this. When I tried to install it with GNOME, it kept on failing, and the installer doesn't have an easy way to recover from a failure. I end up installing XFCE, and that worked. I also went through and tested a Plasma install, and that worked. So I think there's something either wrong with GNOME or something wrong with GDM. So it could have actually been GDM because GDM also would not install. So those are kind of the things. But overall, it's a very lightweight system. It was originally designed as an Arch version of Bunsen Labs, I think, which was a Debian based. And the couple guys that really liked Arch and really liked Bunsen put this together just to say, hey, it's basically the same as Bunsen, only it's using Arch instead of Debian. And the differences here is that that was really designed as a very lightweight, not necessarily desktop environments, but window managers. And 2 years ago, when I first started using ArchLabs on a daily basis, at that point in time, they changed themselves to be an installer where you could put desktop environments or window managers. So if you are looking for an easy Arch install with a variety of window managers, then ArchLabs has more choices. Endeavour is a lot easier to use. This is one of the best ways to get a very, very close to pure Arch up in a feel that feels just like installing any other Linux distro. We have the Calamaris installer versus ArchLabs text-based terminal installer. you just boot it up. You do a couple options. You have to select the desktop environment that you want. Now, Endeavour has more desktop environments than ArchLabs, but it has fewer window managers. I think i3 is the only one as far as the Windows managers it contains. And actually, that's the one I threw on my computer because eventually I would like to learn how to use i3. I'll get to it eventually, and the fact that it's on the actual computer on my desktop right now means that maybe some Saturday I'll boot into it and tinker around and see if I can get this guy working. EndeavourOS, though, is the easiest of all of these different installers to work with because it's just a GUI Calamaris installer. I looked at ArchFi. That one on ArchFi was that one is just way more complicated. You have to answer every single question, although you get a much more pure Arch. ArchLabs is very much like that. There's just a couple fewer questions. You had your Arco Linux. The problem I have with that one is there's so many options on the website, you will spend a lot of time reading it. So I went with EndeavourOS just for simplicity's sake. And so that is where we are at now. So with that, I thought it would be prudent to go through and have a look at our installers. And so what we're going to do is we'll start in with the ArchLabs installer, so you can get a look at what that guy's going to look like here. So let me find my desktop view, and over here you can see I have my ISO in here. In my ISO, I can go with just our basic install script. We can go with install script with speech. We can boot the OS, and then there's just a few other things there. So we're going to go ahead and boot into this. It's going to boot us up into Arch, and then as it boots us up into Arch, we'll have the ability to run the installer. So here we are, and we land right here on a terminal prompt window. And if you're not used to installing Linux, this might actually be like, oh God, what is it? This is the thing I was worried about. People told me not to try Linux. It's a terminal line. I don't know what to do. It's very simple. It just tells you on the screen, just run the command called installer. Now here we get to choose our font. I'm going to go ahead and pick 20 for this case here because this just makes it a little bit bigger. I don't have to edit the size out quite so much. So now that we have a bigger font, I don't have to edit it out a little bit later. Now we can walk through our settings here. So here it's just kind of giving us the instructions. Use the arrow keys, enter, tab keys, etc., in order to push your information. We have to start by selecting our language. It does tell us the default is US, but I found if I do not actually go down here and select US, then it actually will default to whatever that other language is. Now we're going to be checking for new versions. Now right here, it's fairly easy. And this is why ArchLabs is a nice, easy script. Usually the defaults are going to work on nearly everything. Over here, we need to change the partition table. Just go ahead and click the automatic partitioning right here, and it's going to go ahead and partition everything out. So here it's creating this. It's creating our data partition. So here we have SDA1, which is going to contain... we have our boot partition, then we have our home directory partition. Second, we have to mount it. And if you did your partitioning right, it should automatically detect what goes where. So that's nice. And then here we want to select a swap file. And your swap file should be approximately the size of your memory if you do not need hibernation, and twice your memory if you do need hibernation. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick the default there, which is a no hibernation swap file. And then this will take a few seconds here to get running. And here we are choosing where our country is. If you do not select anything, it will automatically partition, but knowing me, it's going to select like Antarctica or something. So we're going to go ahead and change that. Select your bootloader. You have the option between Grub and SysLinux. Username and password. We'll just set this guy up under ArchLabs. Enter my super secret password. That's definitely not 123. Now, if you'd like a separate administrative password, fill them in here. Otherwise, leave those guys blank, and then you will be a sudo user. And now we have our system configuration, Z shell, bash, or I don't know, what is this one? MirBSD, I don't know, corn shell? Corn shell. It sounds too much like corn pops. Let's use bash. I'm used to that one. Here's your host name of your system. And then now we want to select our language. So let's go ahead and come on down and find our US English, and then our time zone. And now we want to pick our kernel. This is one of your differences. You get the basic default Linux kernel in EndeavourOS, but Endeavour has a tool on the GUI to change the kernel later. This one here, we pick which kernel you have here, and it's going to be a little bit harder to change it later. Now we can select our window managers and things. Now you'll notice here there's no options for base packages. This will install what they consider an appropriate suite, and sometimes it works well, and sometimes it does not. So you can see here that we have a lot of desktop managers, window managers rather, and we have some of our basic desktop environments, but we don't have everything. I found in my tests this morning that GNOME keeps failing. And it is, I think it's CDR Tools, I think, has a bad key, and that crashes the entire installer. I did test with Plasma, and I did test with XFCE as well. I did not test Cinnamon because that is dependent on GNOME functions, and I thought that might crash as well. But you can kind of see that you have a couple of different options. And then now we pick our login manager. Now it could also have been GDM, since I went with SDDM on my Plasma build. I went with LightDM on my XFCE build. Both of those installed fine, but on the GNOME build where I had GDM, it failed. So maybe I could try GNOME desktop environment with GDM or something like Plasma with GDM and see if that actually worked. So let's just go ahead and with Light. And then now we can install additional packages. So if you don't install anything here, then only what comes by default with your desktop environment or window manager is going to be installed. So make sure you know what you're doing here. If you are unsure, make sure you at least have a terminal. We have Terminator and Tilix are two terminals in there. There might be a few more in there, but go ahead and install whatever those. And then if you want to run any post-install commands, here's the configuration. And then we go ahead and click the button here, and it will go ahead and install. At this point, if everything works right, I can click OK, go away, and it'll come right on back to this basic main menu, ask you if you want to shut down and reboot the computer afterwards. So that is the ArchLabs installer. Let's actually go ahead and see what ArchLabs is going to look like. And here we are over on the XFCE desktop on ArchLabs. So I didn't install anything else, just I went ahead and ran through the installer, added the LightDM. And so let's just have a brief look at what's in here. One of the things that you'll notice is you don't get anything like POMAC or any other means to manage packages. All we have basically is everything that would come with a default XFCE build, except the icons and the theming is ArchLabs theming. That's pretty much the only difference that we get. So we have a mail reader, we have a web browser, basic XFCE tools. Anything else that we would want to do, we're going to have to go ahead and figure out how to do manually. Let's boot up the file manager, because there's one thing I could not get working initially, and that was browsing my network. But let's see if it works or not. That's actually something I had to build on my old ArchLabs system, but you do not have to build it here. So let's do... give that a try, see if it works. And no. So if I want to access network shares on ArchLabs, I'm going to be fighting with it. I was pretty sure that was the case. But other than that, we do have a pretty good system. It is more of a minimal Arch. It's what we might call de-bloated. But regardless, this is it, and it's good, and you can go from here and build up what you need by following the Arch documentation. That's actually what I did in the past, and I didn't have any issues. So that, let's go ahead and have a look at the EndeavourOS installer next. And here we are with the Endeavour bootloader, and we're just going to go ahead and boot up here. Now, in this case, rather than booting to the scary terminal, we're actually going to boot to a desktop that asks us if we would like to run the installer. Now, Endeavour is excellent because it has a couple choices for the installer. One of these we're going to see is going to say the offline installer, and the other one is going to say it is the online installer. The offline installer is just going to install the XFCE version that they give you in the live CD, versus the online installer is where you go to have a lot of extra tools and options. So we can see here that we have EndeavourOS. We can see we're a live user. It's themed very nicely. It looks pretty good. And over here, we have this nice pop-up information. We can update the mirrors, etc. We're going to start the installer, and this asks us if we like the offline, which is just the XFCE with EndeavourOS theming, and the online lets you choose whatever you want with your vanilla theming, and an internet connection is going to be required. We do have a terminal pop-up here, but then we have the EndeavourOS installer, and then this is the part where we're going to walk through. And this is why Endeavour is a little bit nicer of an installer if you're new to Linux and you're still a little bit concerned about learning the terminal. So over here, let's erase the disk, and then you can choose no swap, swap with no hibernate, or swap with hibernate. It's going to partition everything. Now here is where EndeavourOS stands out. All of these are options and settings that will have things like that, the ability to access my network shares, the ability to run my printers, and all these other things. And if you just keep all these on, you will have a full functioning desktop computer without any issues. Notice here that we have a lot more desktop environments, but we only have just a couple window managers. So we have i3 as a window manager. And really that's it. So if you're really looking for more desktops, EndeavourOS is better. If you're looking for more window managers, ArchLabs is going to be better. You can also add printing support, so you can see a variety of different printing support options. So I selected these on mine, although I've not tested my printer yet. We have support for HP printers and scanners here, and then we have some accessibility tools. So over here, we don't have the option to choose extra software to install. So that took a little extra time when I rebuilt my system using EndeavourOS, but I mean, it was just a matter of loading up Pacman and adding a bunch of packages to my list. So really, once you walk through, let's just select, we'll select the Budgie desktop here. And then you just go ahead and enter your information just like before, and then next through, and then it's going to install. This one will take a little bit longer to install, but then once it installs, no big deal. You're all up and running and ready to go. And so let's go ahead and have a look at what this looks like after the install next. And here we are booted into the EndeavourOS. This is the one where we installed Budgie, and we did not have anything else installed to this particular one, so you can kind of see what's in here. Again, it's just going to give us the software that comes built into Budgie, which is not a whole ton here. But Endeavour has this extra tool that just popped up. So after install, we can update the mirrors. We can run a software updater. We can update the notifications. So the notifications I found are fairly nice. I actually have the notification on my desktop on my production system here that tells me, yeah, there's a couple things I can update over there. You can just change the display managers, resolutions, wallpapers. We also have the kernel manager, which is if you need to manage your kernels, and then a few other things in here as well. Of course, I went through and I installed POMOC and a bunch of other things that I like to have on the system. And I installed some Flatpak support and stuff like that. All of that was wicked easy. And let's just go ahead and pull down our files. And with EndeavourOS, I don't actually have to fight with anything. It finds all my network shares really well. I'm not sure why it's telling me unable to access. Oh, because I need to click on that one. Haha, wrong one. But here I can actually access all of my network shares. This is one of the advantages of going with EndeavourOS, is because it has all of these computer functions and features that I need to have this computer running in a full system without me spending a lot of extra time like, oh, how do I add that network support into the file manager again and stuff like that. And so Endeavour was a really good choice to go for when I chose to change my Arch system around a little bit, just adding a few extra tools and options. So with both of these desktops, we've had a look at both of the desktops, we've had a look at both of the installers. Which one is the better choice? It really is like anything else, depending on your particular situation. If you are already comfortable with the command line, the command line installer is not going to get in your way. And if you are looking for more window managers rather than desktop environments, ArchLabs is definitely hands down the way to go. If you are looking for a wider variety of desktop environments, or if you're still a little bit too frightened of the terminal and you want a good GUI installer, EndeavourOS works. Also, if you need all the things like networking and printing and all of the things you might expect your computer to do out of the box, if you need the vastest majority of those enabled by setup on the first boot, EndeavourOS is going to be a better choice. It's going to get you all of those. But some people call that system bloat. If I don't have printers on the system, if I don't need to access network drives, why bother running all of that stuff on your computer? So these are the fundamental things. Neither one of these is the absolute clear winner. They're both excellent ways to get a very good, very close to base Arch install. None of them are pure Arch. I've downloaded the ISO and walked through every step. But these are really designed to get an Arch system up and running very quickly. They're both excellent. I like them both, and I've used them both. And so I'm a week now on EndeavourOS, and frankly, if you didn't tell me you changed the computer, you could have changed on me and I wouldn't know the difference. So that's my overall final take. So thanks for watching this video. Have a look over the website at switchedtolinux.com for any more information, tips, tricks, and whatever else, and we will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching this video from Switched to Linux. This channel would not be possible without the backing of the program supporters scrolling on the screen now. You can be a supporter at Patreon at patreon.com/TOMM or at thinklifemedia.com. I also want to thank the open source community who creates such excellent software that makes producing this show possible. Please remember to support your software communities. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.